Okay, so let's do this. We're going to walk through a beginner-friendly version of the setting up a neoan3 PHP backend, and going to use it as a pure PHP web page. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that we will not worry about JavaScript at this point. We're going to have a very classical back-end rendered system. And there are a couple of things that we basically want to do in this approach because I want to take my time for people that are have familiar with the very basics of PHP but have never really worked with an object-oriented form or have never really experienced where you can go with it. So there are a couple of things that I need you to manage somehow though is you will require Composer and npm, so node on your system in order to get that smoothly. So if you let me actually Google this here. um, so I'm on a Windows system, that's why it's recommending it, but I mean of course this depends on your machine. So I want you to make sure that you have this, and you can start just a terminal of whatever sort and check this out. So you should have a response here, and we also need composer. um, Cut composer probably right. Same thing here. This is something I need you to do, and that also should in a terminal give you a particular kind of response. Where's the nice beautiful thing on top here? There we go. So those things you need to make sure. Now, common pitfalls are the so-called path variable, depending on the system that you're working with. So if you have any kind of problems, getting that kind of output, um, make sure. And by the way, just to be complete, let's do the same for npm that comes with Node, but we want to make sure that that exists as well and answers with a version. So if you have any kind of problems with having installed but you cannot use this, first of all try to restart your terminal, and if that doesn't do the trick, then probably you have to add the particular sets to your path variables. And so I'm going to say that because it makes it very easy to Google that. So if you basically, I'm pretty sure that, yeah, that's what I want. Um, so this basically describes you, for example, I get the Windows results again, how you would do this. So that's number one. What I personally use here, and this is not a recommendation, requirement, but something you definitely need, is some form of PHP capable localhost, which basically means you need to have PHP installed. Now, to make this pretty easy, I'm using a XAMPP for Windows. That actually maybe something that we want to have a look at. There are a couple of other possibilities you can choose from, but we want to be sure that we have, in that case, an Apache. Also not necessary, but it's going to be easier to follow. A MariaDB, and this is just a like a small difference to MySQL. So if you have something with MySQL, that's absolutely fine. And then PHP. The Perl we actually don't really need. We don't require any kind of, do we? No, we're good. So that's what you need. And so I would recommend basically, using XAMPP for now, and then, but you're naturally welcome to use whatever you want. And yes, you don't necessarily need Apache on your local system in order to run this, but we will work and assume as if that were the case. As you can see, I already have this, and maybe just this is exactly the same, right? This is the local host, so this is probably where you're going to be at. Okay, so next thing we want to do is in that localhost, you will find some form of htdocs or public HTML, depending on what you have, and that is basically where your where your web server serves. So basically the web root. So this is where we are going to handle us forward. So we're going to not use this as the web root. As you can see, this will be my web root. And in my case, this answers with a particular standard system. I kind of tweaked that to give me links to the stuff that I actually have running. So we are going to create a new folder in the directory of the web root. I called it video, but please feel free to call it whatever you want. And you can see this is where I am. So I'm in htdocs, a localhost htdocs video. You might have something like czamp htdocs, depending on your setup. Okay, so if we have that, the first thing we want to do is we want to install the CLI tool that'll help us with a lot of the headaches that we have with file creation and so on. So the first thing you want to do is you want to run npm install and then give that a flag G for global, and then neoan3 CLI. Let's do that. And it's going to take a second. And there we go. Loading all the dependencies. Okay, so if that's done, we're going to check the same thing again. So let's say neoan3 version. Ooh, why is it so slow? Okay, and we see we get an output of the version. Now, again, pitfall here. This is a little bit really strange. If you have global packages in no package manager, and you have no access, your path doesn't have an access to that, but npm works, then that's basically an indicator of some kind of permission problem. You will not experience that in Windows normally, so I'm just going to assume everything is fine. But for people that work in Linux and so on, I would basically start by going with an approach that would allow you to save global variables, global packages, without requiring sudo. That is pretty important. And by the way, even if you are using Windows, the likability of you actually having to deploy in a Linux system is pretty high, so you might as well look into that as well. But for this particular video here, we don't require that at all. So I'm just going to assume everything is fine at this point, and we're going to start with the actual installation of neoan3. So I'm in video, so this is what you want to be in the folder of where we're basically deploying now. So I'm going to say neoan3 new app, and I'm going to call it video. Okay. Now, in note modules, that is interesting. And indeed unexpected. Is there some kind of problem with this installation? Okay, that is interesting. Nope. Okay, let me see what this is doing. Resolve body, what is, oh, from the composer. Okay, that is fine. that is fine. We're going to look into that deeper later. Important at this point is, as you can see, I generated a lot of files here that are basically all files from the neoan3 repository. And so we still have the index.html, which is exactly the file we're looking at right now, and the file that we can see. And this is basically how I test it, whether or not the server is set up correctly. So what we want to look at this point is the question of what do we have here as a folder structure. So let's first basically try to reload, and we will see nothing changed. Oh, actually it did change because it's redirecting to index. So this has a lot to do with the htaccess file. So the index itself is actually still there, as you can see. It's just that if we have no file, it basically starts to work with the PHP. So let us basically see what's happening here. As you can see now, it says like I'm running. This is the PHP version I've installed. Those are all the composer packages that basically are loaded on default. And here is a very handy link to the documentation online, which is something I'm not going to look into right now. So what are we seeing here? That looks a little bit confusing to us at the beginning. So let's first actually ignore this index file and see what we have done. So we called this video. Now if we go into our htaccess file, and here we see probably the problem here. Here we see the problem. Wait, is this true for... Hold on. Let me actually see whether or not this is related to this problem here. It seems to be. Nope. It's all fine. Strange hiccup. Okay, it's just not capable of rewriting. Okay. I will definitely have to look into that. So what do we have here is basically the htaccess file, and it's going to look for the rewrite base in this case, and that's what I need to ensure that that's the same. Now on any kind of deployment system, or when I have it in the web root, this would simply be a slash, but in our case we want to have it called video, and that's in 99% of the cases everything you need to do. And so let's see what's actually happening. So I'm running this index file, and what it does is it loads the core, and the core basically would look into the default PHP to see what we're loading. So I have two things that I kind of wonder here. First of all is, okay, so if no route is specified, what route would you like to be loaded? And you can see in that case it is demo. And if a route cannot be found, what controller do I want to be loaded? And it is my not found controller. Now if you look over here, we see that basically, so here we have an underscore neon. This is something you never need to touch. It's the actual core. Then here we have asset, which basically is where you place your, right now we have a PNG with the favicon in here. That's this little thing up here. We have component, and this is where our components are, and we can see there's demo. So apparently what we're loading right now, and not found. Let's try to figure that out. Oh, that is interesting that we see that. So what is the matter here is what we need to do after installation, and this is probably what failed at this point, is we have to run the composer update. And if such a thing happens, actually it should tell us this. Where is it? Oh, it doesn't say. Tell us that. Okay. So if we reload that now, we will see. Okay, now the everything is loaded, and the we couldn't find this endpoint is exactly what the default 404 is. Now I can design that, of course, and this is exactly what we're going to look into right now. So let's first question a couple of things. So what are those components? As you can see, I have a controller. Let's actually close all other things. I have a controller, and I have a view, and I have a version. As you can see, the version can be ignored. It's not that important to us. That is something that we need for under the hood functionality. And the view is basically what we are interested in. So let's go back to that and see what we're doing. So we have an H1 and that says running. And this is already interesting that I see that one. That probably should be like this in order to work. Yep. And then we have this welcome to new project, and then we can see we're already using a particular form of template engine that we're not going to go into right now. So I'm apparently iterating over something, and this generates this list. And here's the link to the documentation with the box. Now, the first question that you might want to have is, where does the CSS come from? And this is something that we can basically better see if we look at the component themselves. So every route component has a function init. This init function basically is executed whenever a particular route gets visited. So in that case, the demo, basically, right? In reality, we're here. And so here I'm loading, this is maybe not too interesting, from the composer JSON. I'm wondering what kind of things are loaded. And here is where the actual action begins. So this uni is from the Unicore. As you can see, this class demo extends Unicore. And I'm loading a frame. Now, what is a frame? A frame is basically my complete setup for a project. So if I go into frames, I can see I have a demo frame. Let's maybe have a look at that one. So there's a CSS, as you can already see, and there's a demo class. So in the demo class, I am able to find particular constants. So this is a function that basically returns an array. Now, what does this array do? It basically is a configuration file that can have particular settings, and let's talk about some of those settings right now. So base is basically the web root. As you can see, we already have this automatically defined. We're just defining it so it can be used within particular views and so on. I show you what that means. If I, for example, here were to generate a P with base, then you can see that right here it would show the context of where I'm running in. So in that case, localhost video. And then I have a link, which is a particular form of, well, that's in that case basically a meta tag. And this is where I load the favicon. And then I have style sheet. And style sheet is an array because, of course, I can load multiple style sheets. Okay, that said, there are a lot of other things that I can load, but all of those functions basically can also be written in a different way. This is maybe something that we can look at in our first own frame. We'll get to that in a second. So this is basically, I'm loading my required constants. In some cases, this is a little bit more than just a setup of files to load. This could be particular connections, all kinds of credentials, and so on. Then I'm basically calling for hook. As you can see, this is a singleton, so I'm just going to start writing. And the format of this is what we call stream of consciousness. So basically, everything happens in a procedural way. So now I've loaded the frame demo, and now I'm hooking into the hook main. Now, it is interesting to know that the HTML that we generate here has a header, a neon root element that is for single page application use, and then we have this div class container, which we see here. So we basically hook as not the header, but as the main content. We start hooking in. Oops, where are we? Let me close that. Actually, we start hooking in particular content. So what are we hooking in? We're hooking in demo, and we are presenting it with info, which is basically a variable. In that case, it's a associative array that I'm going to pass on to the template, and that ultimately generates this list. And of course, I can do other hooks. So again, I have the hook header. So I could place some kind of header here, and could also place some kind of variables here. And of course, I also have a footer, and so on. Now, what I could also do is I could basically say add head, and actually let me do this right now, and say title test. And as we can see up here, TEST, it appears in the awkward way we have written it. And at the end of this, I'm calling the output function, which basically means the buffer will be rendered. Now, this way of writing it basically always assumes that particular file naming conventions are followed. So if I look into my component, I can see I have a demo view HTML, and that is what is going to be loaded. So if I basically say load the view demo, it assumes that, okay, so in component there's a folder demo, and there's a demo.view.html. The .html is actually, you can substitute that with pug and so on, but that's not part of this particular um, tutorial. So what we probably want to do is we want to go and create our own system. So at the very beginning of it, let's start by generating a own frame. So I'm going to go down here and say neoan3 new frame video. Okay, and the frame video is created. Let's see if that is true. It is true. So this is an empty class right now. There's really nothing that is done that would give us the impression that like anything is loaded at all. So if we are changing back to our demo and say we want to use a different frame right now, we want to use the frame video, then what you will see is it'll still work nicely. We just haven't loaded anything particular in that frame, but everything works just as expected. So we're going to give our frame a couple of capabilities, stuff that we always load on every on every page. And let's start with a front-end framework. I'm going to start with Bulma. So I'm going to use No Package Manager, install Bulma. Okay, so in my node packages, which should be somewhere here, node modules, I see that Bulma is installed. So I have a couple of possibilities of how it can work now. Of course, the nice way is to start, using the Sass file and then include my own variables and work my way through there. Um, for the simplicity of this particular video, I'm simply going to use the min CSS that is probably, yes, that's probably already generated. So let's go back to our video frame and basically remember how this markup from the other frame looked like, right? Let's actually compare that. Let's look at the demo frame and see. So apparently we have a function constants. Let's do that in our video frame and say, okay, so function constants, and as you can see, this my ID already suggests me to do that. So this effectively overwrites the default constants in serve, and I don't want to return the parent though. I'm not interested in the parent at all, and I'm interested in style sheet, and that's going to be an array. And in this case, it's going to be, and I'm also going to use the base variable again. So base and then node modules and Bulma CSS, Bulma min. Actually, let's do the Bulma CSS so the ID can be smarter. That's fine for our purposes. Let's see if that works. And we can see things have already changed for us visually. And now we're basically loading Bulma, as you can basically see in the head. Sorry, no, you can't, because this is actually rendered. I'm going to show you that actually like this. So we have a couple of ways of basically including this. As you can see, we have included this as a same origin. So this basically comes from our own server. This is not an external source. So what it's doing is it's basically rendering it directly to the DOM. So you have a faster output in this case. This is pretty smart. I don't want to go into like when does it do that and when it doesn't do that. For now, we're just fine with that being directly rendered into the DOM. So let's create our first component in that case. So let's go back down here and say, okay, neoan3 new component, and I'm going to call it first component. Note how when I write it, I use camel case. This is something that I highly recommend because everything will react accordingly. Okay, so now the CLI asks me what kind of component is it. So in this video, we can only look at route components. So I'm going to click on that one. Do I want to create a view for it? I do. Do you want to use a frame? Yes. And I want to use the frame video in that case. Okay. So in my component list, I now have first component. So first thing we want to do is we're going to see if that now is activated. So the way I'm writing it is I'm going to say first component. No. And apparently not. Oh, because I called it fist component. That is unfortunate, but let's pretend that that's okay for now. So our fist component basically is visited by switching the case system to kebab case, and that basically generates nice and clean URLs. And now we can basically have a first look at that. So as we can see, it is basically the same. Let me rearrange that here a little bit. And I'm loading the hook main and with the first component and output that. So that's all I'm doing right now. And this basically has a very simple way. So let's I don't know if you're familiar with Bulma and let's just do a little bit of basics here and say container. Let's just assume we have something here. My first page, and then maybe welcome to my website. Okay, let's do this for now and see how it behaves. Okay, so this is basically how we would start generating things. So I probably now already start to have the necessity to basically load particular headers, for example. So I have, of course, a couple of possibilities to do that. So if I were to basically say, we're going to close all others, and say I can, of course, do this, right? And say hook header, and then include a particular header. But since I'm probably going to do this in general, I only want to do this if I'm going to overwrite my default header for this particular frame, which means I have to find a way to generate the header in the frame. So first of all, we don't have a header, and we want to have the header as a component because maybe we need functionality and stuff like that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, neoan3 new component header. In that case, you know what? Let's keep it straight. Let's keep it straight for here. I don't want to confuse you. We actually don't need a route component in this case. So I'm going to use my header, and simply going to quickly do here something navbar navbar brand navbar item test. Okay, has background primary, sure. Okay, so let's test it again. Let's test it here. So here we're going to say hook header, and the view is also called header, and we can see we start generating a navbar here. And again, this is not how we want to do it, because we would basically repeat ourselves in every page. So how do we get a standard header in every single time we're loading it? Well, of course, we need to visit our frame. So in our frame video, we want to find a way to basically fill this. So since the fist component extends the Unicore and ultimately loads with this little piece of code here, the video frame, it should be possible to basically set that before this is running. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to use the function construct. And so what we want to do here is we actually need the construct of the parent in this case. So we don't want to override the construct of the serve. So make sure that you do load the regular construct here. Everything is supposed to run fine. I don't want to override anything here. Excuse me. What I want to do instead is I want to add to the functionality. So how would I do that? Well, I would need a way to basically use the hook. And as you can see, I have this possibility here, and I can say header, and that will basically be everything I need, and it should work. So let's make sure that we removed it here. I'm going to remove it here. Right, so in our actual component, we're not loading the header anymore. We expect that to be done before we're running in our frame. And let's see if that is true. And we can see this is true. And that is basically how we can automate a couple of includes, so we don't have to worry about that in within, like the page that we're working on, if like header and footer and some kind of elements and basically everything that we want to load on a general basis. So can I overload the header or basically replace it again on a particular page? Of course I can. So I can say, okay, for whatever reason I'm working on a page that has a different header or no header or whatsoever. Okay, so that is basically how we can work with this. So let's maybe look at a couple of basics when it comes to variables. In a very general sense, we have our header, and we're going to say this is my project title. So I can basically use a particular markup. As you can see, this will actually now not work because we're not giving it any kind of, we don't know this variable. So we're loading, in this case, we're loading it from our frame from video. So in here, whenever we load a view, we have the possibility to add particular variables. So let's now construct that manually and say, and we would probably normally load this from a database or so, and say test project. And if I start reloading it, I will see that now this variable is filled with this particular information. Okay, so far so good. We're not completely done with our header. What we also want is, let me see out here probably, and this is something I actually need to quickly Google that because, and actually I can do this over here so you guys see what I'm doing. Let me see, where would we have any kind of navigation? Here. So what do we have here? It's a navbar menu. We don't need a burger for our case. Okay. All right. And then we have the same thing here and say navbar item. And here we're actually going to have a link. And I can again use base if I want to have an absolute URL. And I'm going to say it's going to base second and say second. Okay. Let's see if that worked. Of course, I should have done it with the navbar burger. So let's do it this way for now. Okay, and then we have our link here. I'm not going to worry about responsiveness at this point. I don't want to go too much into Bulma. It's just an example. So this link, of course, now leads to nowhere. So actually, let's make sure that we have second as in existence. So again, let's do neoan3 new component second. And this is going to be a route component. It's going to load the same frame. And if we go here now, we can basically see this goes to page second. And I have not given this. Let's actually also give this a quick home here, so we can navigate back at least between those. All right. Okay. Fair enough. Now, what are the next steps? So we basically have, oh, we actually didn't want to go here. We wanted to go to oh, you know what? No. What we're going to do now is we're going to change the default home page. So we're going to go to default and basically say, okay, this now is our first component is our general route. And if I reload it, I can see this is my home page now. Okay, so there are a couple of things to be said about what we did with the header. We actually generated this as a route component, which basically means that in theory I could go and do this, which I don't want to do. As you can see, this is not an outcome I want, and so I'm going to get rid of this particular problem by actually simply deleting this for now. I mean, yeah, no, we don't need this for here. We don't need this for here. In reality, there actually might be information on the header that you set active states and so on. So you actually might want to run some logic. But for now, we're simply going to use the view, and it's going to be fine. Okay, so where are we at? So we have basically generated our components. Of course, the second component is something that I could jump into right now and say, okay, um, what does it look like right now? Maybe I want to load a particular. Nah, let's not even go down that way. Let me think what we have achieved so far. So basically, what we have said is we have basically installed neoan3. We have okay, generated new routes and set up a frame. Okay. Oops. Oh, we're supposed to be here. So, is there anything else we would want at the moment? Probably yes, but let's actually stay where we are and look at a couple of possibilities that we can basically achieve. So, let's tweak this up a little bit and like get a little bit more out of it. So we've already learned that in every hook I can basically input particular data. So for example, I'm going to say variable, and I'm going to say that has a value. And if I then go into the fist component view, I can basically say variable, and you will see value is what I now generate. So I can do this from everywhere whenever I use a hook. Now, there are a lot of functionalities that might be of interest. So one of the most common things that you will immediately get is you will probably notice that, and by the way, if you have the possibility of a cool IDE, this will basically give you a lot of interesting ideas of what you can do. And why things are here. As you can see, I can influence context also from the routes and so on and so on. So what we want to do though is a callback. A callback is one of the first things that we probably need. So this stream of consciousness basically kind of puts us in the spot of where to write additional functionality to process something, calculate, and so on. So let's just say I have a function, and this needs to be a public function, and I'm going to call it process. And basically here say serve, oops, come on, you can do it. Okay. And can basically say, okay, I'm going to give the context this, and I want to run process. So what this does is basically it at this point, so after we've done here, we're going to call a function, in that case in the context of this very file we're in right now, and we're going to execute the function process, which will be this function. And just to show you what this is, so this would be my unisingleton, and here I have exactly the same stuff again. So I could, for example, here do particular things like adding a style sheet. or adding to the controllers and so on. So what I could also do though is I could use, sorry, particular variables that I have available. So what do I mean by that? There is, for example, a running JS or HTML that I can influence. So let's just say I wanted to add to that and say, okay, let's test this out, whether or not that's true, and say alert foo. Right? That's not a nice way of writing it, but just for our possibilities here, and see whether or not we can include some JavaScript. And you can see it directly works. Now this is of course nothing you would normally do, but you do have the power to basically influence everything that happens under the hood directly. What you would probably normally do is you can accommodate to this controller a JavaScript file. So for example, if I say, okay, so I'm in my first component, so I'm going to say create a new JavaScript file that I'm going to call exactly like that. And component dot controller dot JS. So I don't need the JS, it's going to do that automatically. And also going to say alert var. And here I'm actually going to get rid of this and see what happens. And you can see this JavaScript file is automatically loaded into the page. Now again, I can load my own JavaScript files based on the actual route I'm in, or I can do that in the frame and basically say there are particular JavaScript files that I want to have loaded every single time. In which case, I would basically say include JS, and you can see you can include modules, you can include JS, or you can include elements. I'm not going to go into elements today, but that's for native elements, so web components and so on. We're not going to do this at this point. Okay, so why would we use a process and what can we do with it? So let's imagine we would have a private variables. Okay, and here, why is this? Okay, and here we're basically going to say this variables. Now, let's just assume that there's something I need to process here in order. So I'm just going to say do stuff here. And let's say reading from a database. We can do that pretty soon. And there we're going to say, okay, so now this variables equals, and what do we call this variable? And here we now say, oops, other value. Okay, and then you can see, oh, that we're still doing that. And variable. Okay, that's actually not working. Let's actually first get rid of this because this is going to annoy us a lot. Okay. No, sorry. That see, I'm dreaming. This is exactly what I meant with stream of consciousness. So this happens after this, right? So what we want to do is we want to ensure that whatever we do, this happens before we have an output, right? So if we do it now, you can see we all of a sudden see other value. And just because we're curious, let's actually try if we can enter some HTML here. And you see this works just fine, which of course means I could load complete other templates here and inject it in that way into this template. So far so good? Okay. Now let's quickly look into like routing in general. So probably if you have worked with other frameworks or you haven't, you are probably used to generating routes per per definition. So you probably like have some form of routing that is either an array or whatever that would take care of such things. Now here with neoan3, you probably noticed that none of that is necessary. So if I have a particular kind of component, which and that component has an init function, it works just fine. And that is basically the simplicity of it. And we now sometimes need a particular requirement, and that's what we could do, for example, here to verify certain steps and so on that are only valid for a particular view. So that might be authentication. Let's say like we only are allowed to see this when we're logged in, then we would basically react on that accordingly. Now, in order to be able to break out of this, all neoan3 apps are static functions, which basically means if I had a particular, actually, let's do this. This is a little bit of a detour, but composer require neoan and 3 apps session. Let's actually install that, and I actually can't forgot, like, do we even have that already? No, we don't. Okay. All right, that should be fine. So now I have session available, and if it were to find it, all right, then I have to do it the nice way. Oh, come on. neoan3 apps. Wait, why don't you have session? Something is wrong. So apparently loaded. I think something's wrong with my file system today. Oh, now it appears. Now this is so weird. Okay. And can then say restricted. And what would happen now is, well, in that case, actually, it would generate an endless loop, because this would automatically take me back to the home page, which now I'm on the home page, so this is not going to work. But this is basically how we can work outside of this this system, right? Where we can basically say, okay, so should we have the requirement to basically have functionality prior to loading the singleton, and that's actually a very performant way of looking at it, then we can do that. Okay, so we've talked about this. So maybe the last thing we want to do is we want to connect to a database, which is a pretty common task, and it's probably something, one of the first things you want to do is like, okay, how does that work? So let me actually quickly see. I should have a database here ready for us. So let's see. This is localhost. User is root. Password is empty and hidden. And this is the DB app. Should be a test database I can work with. If let me check. Okay. So you can do that by whatever means you want to. I mean, you can do that in your PHP MyAdmin, for example. That's if you are loading XAMPP, that's a possibility. Let me see. Right, this should look like this. So you just say PHP MyAdmin, and then this is a pretty basic interface. It does its job, but it will get annoying soon. But maybe interesting for beginners, because it's very straightforward, and it's has a user interface. So as we can see, we already have, and let me filter this out quickly. We don't need the collations. No, not interested. Okay. Right, this would be our database. You can see I already have a couple of fields in there. Let me actually see if I have something in here. Tasks. Okay, sure. Why not? I did that for a different demo. So let's actually start loading the task. So you can see in my apps here, let me close this. Neon already ships with a DB. You can use whatever you want. So again, it's like whatever works for Symfony, and whatever is static works for you. I'm going to use the neoan3 DB app in order to now get a couple of things solved. But of course, we have no credentials anywhere, and this is maybe something that we want to have a little bit of a look into. So if you are working with particular security considerations, and or you want to have an open source system, you probably don't want to start by opening up your frame and placing your database credentials in here. So for those kind of reasons, and that is basically the best practice, there is a tool called neoan3 credentials. And I'm actually just going to see, yes, there are, I do have a couple of credentials saved. So I am, in my case, create a new one, and I'm gonna call it video. And in video, I'm going to create a couple of properties. So first of all, I'm gonna say host, and the value of host in that case is localhost. And I can see this is how it saves it. So actually, let me get to neoan3 no db. Yeah, that should do it. Let me actually see what kind of data I need, and here you can see it. So this defaults, so I wouldn't have needed localhost. The DB name, that's something I need. Okay, so let's do create new, and let's say name, and the value is DB app. Okay, so do I need a user is root, password is empty, and assumes UUID. Yeah, that's what I need. Assumes your UID. Okay, and that is true in our case. Okay, so we are, I know this by heart, by the way, that's, should that be confusing, I know that I gave this a binary ID, so I'm using unique IDs rather than auto increment IDs. That's why, and here I can do save and exit, and we should be fine. Now in my video PHP, what I can now do is I can basically say, okay, so I have the particular credentials, right? Let's actually do that and say my credentials are, and this is a global function, get credentials. And oh, I need to do this, what do we call it? Video. Unhandled exception. Wait, is this even what I think it is? No, it's not. Okay. Okay, fair enough. So I would normally try, of course. Actually, let's do this nicely. I could simply not have credentials. And then basically say catch exception E. And what is happening here? Oh, we kind of lost this buddy here. And here we're basically going to say var dump and die with the problem should it exist, because we don't want to execute at this point. No, not the nicest solution, but it will do. And so should we get the credentials though, what we want is we want to set the database to set environment, and now we're going to say credentials video. Okay, Now let's see if this runs smoothly. Okay, that looks good. And let's actually make a test call here to see whether or not the credentials work. So I'm going to basically say db. Oh, by the way, it's very important because my IDE does that, and I know some people are confused about it. So I cannot just use db. Of course, you can see that I basically it does that for me automatically, but this is the fully qualified namespace that you want to use, and that's basically what you require to run, or you basically just do use like I do, and or my IDE does for me actually, and then we're fine. So let's actually quickly die here and say we want to have a simple query at this point where we say select now. Yep, and we can already see what it's doing. So it returns an array. In that case, the array has only one result, and it is now called now, and this is the time of actually recording this very video. So that works. So we're happy with the database setup, and as you can see, I don't have any kind of credentials here. This is basically stored in the root outside of the web root in your system, and that works on your deployment system where you probably have different credentials than on your local system. So let's go back to our first component and say, okay, we want to load those tasks, right? Remember, so we have task. Yeah, let's actually just load task. Let's keep this easy. We're already at the hour. So I say no, this variables is actually directly a result. And I'm going to say, and again, don't forget, this happens for me automatically. You will need this. DB, and I'm going to say easy. Well, there's a lot to say about the way I can query here. If you're interested, like look into that. There are a lot of there's a lot of documentation of how to query and so on. And actually, you know what? We're probably going to make this even easier, so we don't need to get into markup you're not familiar with. So if I'm starting with this sign here, then basically means directly execute a SQL, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to say select everything from task, and actually now thinking about it, let's do this. Let's do it the easy way. So as you can see, I can say okay table, and then I just say everything, and that's all I need to do. Now I could add a condition, for example, where I don't know, delete date is null, let's say it like that, or where ID equals a particular ID, and so on. So, but for now I'm happy with just getting all of the tasks here. So I will have, if I remember it correctly, I will have 5 entries here. So those 5 entries will naturally not render to one particular variable. So let's actually first see what do we have here. So let's quickly say, okay, what is this variables, right? So how does this look like? And I can see, okay, this is simply an array with my 5 hits, and that's probably not what I want. So I'm probably going to say, okay, this is something I need to iterate over. And here I basically going to say tasks. And what I have now is I added this little variable here, and that should be everything we need. Now that basically means that I'm now passing tasks and that again is an array, into the template. So if I were to just run it now, I would not be able to fill it. Well, first of all, because I don't have a variable. But even if I were to write tasks, um, it would be unable to actually produce anything useful because that is an array and it doesn't know how to render this array. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say tasks, and I'm going to create a unsorted list, and here I'm going to say n4 equals, and then I'm just going to write the same markup that I would in PHP. So that's basically a for each. The only thing I'm going to omit is the $sign. So I'm going to say for tasks as task, and now I can basically say task, and I remember it had a name, so I can say task.name, and as you can see, it will automatically generate that for me. Yeah, so far so good. So of course I can do this on the front end, like give this to some kind of API and so on. But for now, this is basically how we're going to do it. And that is probably all for now that we're going to do. And I hope this cleared up a couple of things. I know that at the beginning things are a little weird if you get used to, like new environments and so on. But you will soon see that this enables you to rapidly develop and probably also get into and that's why I specifically didn't get too much into JavaScript right now, because the interesting part about this is like hybrid systems where you basically have a combination of what happens with JavaScript and the front end, and what happens from the rendering perspective of the server. So, because the big difference, between this and JavaScript rendered iteration, for example, is like, okay, this actually is rendered in the DOM, so Google would see this and would index this from a SEO standpoint. While if I were to do this with JavaScript, this information is simply not available, and I mean, that's not 100% true anymore. I mean, they're working on parsing JavaScript, but for the most part, this will simply be, the clearer process for SEO purposes. And yes, thank you very much for listening. I know this has been kind of a quick introduction. There will be so much more to say, but I think this is enough to get you going as a beginner. We are working on documentation. We're super far behind that. Sorry about that. GitHub is I mean, when I say GitHub, uh, the the people working on the documentation, they have not, created any pull requests yet, but everything is in the making, and soon we'll be able to provide you with way better support. And before that's the case, be sure to just reach out. Just go to neoan.us and hit me up personally. And if you have any kind of questions, problems whatsoever, I'll make sure to take care of it personally. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your day.